What if the very person trusted to keep your child safe was the one putting them in danger? The autumn leaves crunched beneath police boots as officers approached the modest two-story home on Maple Street. Red and blue lights painted the quiet suburban neighborhood in an eerie glow, casting long shadows across manicured lawns that had never seen such commotion. Inside the Johnson home, 6-year-old Lisa sat curled in her mother's arms, her small voice barely above a whisper as she repeated the words that would change everything. "The bus driver did it again, Mama. He did it again." This is the story of how those 5 words unraveled a dark secret that had been hiding in plain sight for years. A secret that would divide a community, expose uncomfortable truths about prejudice and power, and prove that sometimes the most dangerous predators were the uniforms we're taught to trust. What Nina Johnson did next didn't just protect her daughter. It ignited a movement that would transform their entire community forever. 3 months earlier, the Johnson family had packed their entire life into a moving truck, leaving behind the familiar chaos of a city for what they hoped would be a peaceful new beginning in Millbrook Heights. Malcolm Johnson, a software engineer, had finally landed his dream job at a tech company just 20 minutes from this quiet suburb. His wife, Nina, a nurse practitioner, had found a position at the local medical center. For their 6-year-old daughter, Lisa, it meant starting over at a new school, making new friends, and navigating a world that looked very different from the diverse neighborhood they'd left behind. "Look, baby girl," Nina had said as they pulled into their new driveway, pointing to the pristine elementary school visible just 3 blocks away. "Your new school is so close, you might even be able to walk there someday." Lisa pressed her nose to the car window, taking in the sight of children playing in yards that seemed to stretch on forever, so different from the cramped apartment building where she'd spent her first 6 years. Everything here was bigger, newer, cleaner. But as the days passed, she began to notice something else too. How conversations stopped when her family walked by, how some neighbors seemed to look right through them, how she was often the only brown face in spaces filled with curious stares. The school bus was yellow and cheerful, just like the ones in her picture books. But the man behind the wheel, Mr. Robert Miller, made her stomach twist with uneasiness from the very first day. He was a large man with graying hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to follow her every movement. While he greeted other children with smiles and friendly waves, his interactions with Lisa were curt, distant, and increasingly hostile. "Move to the back," he would bark when she climbed aboard, even though there were empty seats near the front. "And stay quiet. I don't want to hear a peep out of you." But one ordinary Tuesday afternoon in October, Lisa came home with trembling hands and tear-stained cheeks, and her parents realized the problem was much worse than they had ever imagined. Lisa had always been a chatty child, bubbling over with stories about her day the moment she walked through the front door. But that Tuesday, she slumped onto the couch without a word, her small shoulders carrying a weight that seemed impossible for someone so young. Nina knelt beside her daughter, gently brushing away the tears that had dried on her cheeks. "What happened at school today, sweetheart? You seem upset." "Nothing," Lisa whispered, but her voice cracked on the word. Malcolm looked up from his laptop, his parental instincts immediately on high alert. "Lisa, you know you can tell us anything, right? Did someone hurt your feelings?" For a long moment, Lisa said nothing. Then, in a voice so quiet they had to strain to hear her, she began to speak. "Last week, when it was raining really hard, Mr. Miller, the bus driver, he made me get off the bus early. He said there was too much noise, and it was all coming from me, even though I wasn't talking to anyone." Her words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them in for days. "He made me walk 4 blocks home in the rain. I was so scared, Mama. I didn't know where I was." Nina's blood ran cold. Malcolm set down his laptop with such force that it rattled the coffee table. "He left you alone? A 6-year-old child, alone in the rain?" Malcolm's voice was dangerously quiet. Lisa nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. He said no one would believe me. He said with the color of my skin, people would think I was lying. He said I'd better learn to keep my mouth shut if I wanted to ride his bus." The silence that followed was deafening. Nina felt as though someone had reached into her chest and squeezed her heart with ice-cold fingers. All those times she'd worried about Lisa adjusting to a new school, making friends, keeping up with her studies. Never had she imagined that the very person responsible for getting their daughter safely to and from school would be the source of danger. Malcolm stood up abruptly, pacing to the window and back, his hands clenched into fists. We should have known. We should have seen the signs. How could we have known? Nina's voice was thick with guilt and anger. We trusted the system. We trusted that the adults in charge of our daughter's safety would actually keep her safe. Lisa looked between her parents, confusion and fear written across her young face. Am I in trouble? I didn't mean to make anyone mad. Nina pulled her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. No, baby, you're not in trouble. You did nothing wrong. Nothing at all. But as she held Lisa tight, she could feel her daughter's body trembling against her own. And she knew, with a mother's devastating intuition, that there was more to this story. Lisa, she said gently, is there anything else you need to tell us? Anything else that happened? Lisa pulled back to look into her mother's eyes, and in that moment, Nina saw a flicker of something that broke her heart. The look of a child who had learned too young that the world wasn't safe, that adults couldn't always be trusted, that sometimes keeping quiet seemed like the only way to survive. He did it again today, Mama, Lisa whispered. And this time was worse. The story that emerged over the next hour was worse than either parent had imagined. Nina made hot chocolate while Malcolm sat beside Lisa on the couch, his large hand gently stroking her hair as she found the courage to speak the words that had been trapped inside her all day. After school today, I was the last one on the bus, Lisa began, her voice small but steady. Mr. Miller looked at me in his big mirror and said he was tired of dealing with my kind. He said I was probably going to grow up to be a criminal anyway, so he might as well start treating me like one now. Nina's hand tightened around the mug she was holding, the ceramic growing hot against her palm. He made the bus stop about 6 blocks from our house, right by that big empty lot with all the tall weeds. He opened the door and told me to get out. When I said I was scared to walk by myself, he laughed. Lisa's voice began to shake. He said maybe being scared would teach me some respect. Malcolm closed his eyes, fighting back the rage that threatened to overwhelm him. What happened next, sweetheart? I started crying, and that made him even angrier. He got up from his seat and came back to where I was sitting. He grabbed my arm really tight, tight enough that it hurt, and he dragged me to the front of the bus. Lisa pushed up her sleeve, revealing finger-shaped bruises that were already beginning to darken on her small arm. Nina gasped, nearly dropping the hot chocolate. The sight of those bruises on her daughter's skin ignited something primal and fierce within her, a protective rage that made her hands shake. He pushed me off the bus and slammed the door. Lisa continued. I could hear him laughing as he drove away. I didn't know which way to go at first. I got lost twice trying to find our street. By the time I got home, it was almost dark. Malcolm gathered his daughter in his arms, his voice thick with emotion. Lisa, I am so sorry this happened to you. This man had no right to touch you, no right to leave you alone, no right to speak to you that way. None of this is your fault. But what if he's right? Lisa asked, looking up at her father with eyes that held too much knowledge for someone so young. What if no one believes me because I'm different from everyone else here? Nina knelt down in front of her daughter, taking her small hands in her own. Baby girl, look at me. You're not different in any way that matters. You are smart and kind and brave and beautiful. That man is a bully and a coward who picks on children because he knows they can't fight back. But you know what? You're not alone anymore. Daddy and I are going to make sure this never happens to you again. What are we going to do? Lisa asked. Malcolm and Nina exchanged a look over their daughter's head, a silent conversation passing between them in the way that only couples who have weathered storms together can communicate. We're going to call the police, Malcolm said firmly. Tonight. But even as he spoke those words, Nina could see the doubt flickering in his eyes. They both knew the statistics, understood the reality of being a black family in a predominantly white suburb. Would the police believe them? Would anyone believe them? Or would they be dismissed as overprotective parents, troublemakers trying to cause problems where none existed? Lisa must have sensed their uncertainty because she pressed closer to her mother. What if they don't believe us either, Mama? Nina looked down at her daughter. This brave, brilliant little girl who had endured so much and was still finding the courage to speak her truth, and felt a resolve steel within her that was stronger than any doubt. "Then we'll make them believe us," she said quietly. "We'll keep talking until someone listens." At 8:47 p.m., Malcolm Johnson dialed 911 with trembling fingers while Nina held Lisa close on the living room couch. The dispatcher's voice was professional but detached as Malcolm tried to explain the situation. Their 6-year-old daughter had been physically and verbally abused by her school bus driver, abandoned in an unsafe area, and threatened into silence. "Officers will be there within the hour," the dispatcher assured him. But there was something in her tone that made Malcolm wonder if this would be taken seriously or filed away as a minor complaint. The next 43 minutes felt like a lifetime. Nina helped Lisa change into her pajamas and made her another cup of hot chocolate, while Malcolm paced the living room, rehearsing what he would say to the police. They had coached Lisa gently, reminding her to tell the truth in her own words, to show the officers her bruises, to be brave just a little bit longer. When a knock finally came at the front door, Lisa instinctively moved closer to her mother. Through the window, they could see 2 police officers, one white, one black, standing on their porch with notepads in hand. Officer David Thompson was a 20-year veteran of the force, a tall man with graying temples and the kind of permanent scowl that suggested he'd seen too much of humanity's dark side. His partner, Officer Keisha Brooks, was younger, with intelligent eyes and a gentler demeanor that immediately put Lisa more at ease. "Good evening, folks. I'm Officer Thompson. This is Officer Brooks. We understand you have a complaint about a school bus driver." Malcolm invited them in, gesturing toward the living room where Nina and Lisa waited. "Thank you for coming. This is my wife, Nina, and our daughter, Lisa. Lisa, can you tell the officers what happened to you today?" Lisa looked up at the 2 uniformed adults towering over her, and for a moment, Nina worried that her daughter might lose her nerve. But then Lisa straightened her shoulders and began to speak, her voice clear despite the tremor Nina could hear underneath. "Mr. Miller is my bus driver. He doesn't like me because I'm black. He says mean things to me and makes me sit in the back of the bus even when there are seats up front. Today he made me get off the bus far from my house, and I had to walk home by myself. He grabbed my arm really hard, and it still hurts." Officer Brooks knelt down to Lisa's eye level, her voice gentle. "That sounds very scary, Lisa. Can you show me where he grabbed you?" Lisa pushed up her sleeve again, revealing the bruises that had darkened even more in the past few hours. Officer Brooks took several photos with her phone, documenting the evidence with professional precision. Officer Thompson, however, remained standing with his arms crossed, his expression skeptical. "That's quite a serious accusation you're making against Mr. Miller. Bob Miller has been driving school buses in this district for over 15 years. He's well respected in the community. Are you suggesting my daughter is lying?" Malcolm's voice carried a warning edge that made Officer Thompson's eyebrows rise. "I'm not suggesting anything, Mr. Johnson. I'm just saying we need to be thorough in our investigation. Children sometimes misinterpret adult behavior, especially when they're adjusting to new environments." Nina felt her temper flare. "Misinterpret? Officer Thompson, my daughter has finger-shaped bruises on her arm. She was abandoned blocks from home and forced to find her way back alone in the dark. What exactly is there to misinterpret?" Officer Brooks stood up, shooting her partner a look that suggested this wasn't the first time they disagreed on how to handle a case. "Mrs. Johnson, we take these allegations very seriously. We'll need to interview Mr. Miller and get his side of the story. In the meantime, I'd recommend documenting any further incidents and perhaps requesting a different bus route for Lisa." "That's not enough," Malcolm said firmly. "This man physically abused our daughter and threatened her. He told her that no one would believe her because of her race. This isn't just about getting Lisa on a different bus. This is about making sure he can't do this to any other child." Officer Thompson sighed, clearly wanting to wrap up this call and move on to something he considered more pressing. "Look, we'll talk to Miller tomorrow. But I have to tell you, these kinds of situations often come down to one person's word against another's. Without witnesses or additional evidence, it's difficult to build a case." Lisa had been listening quietly, but now she spoke up, her young voice carrying a strength that surprised everyone in the room. "I'm not lying, and I'm not the only one." All four adults turned to look at her. Officer Brooks crouched down again. "What do you mean, Lisa? Are there other children this has happened to?" "There's a girl named Sarah in my class. She rides a different bus now because she said Mr. Miller was mean to her too. And Marcus, who's in 3rd grade, his mama had to start driving him to school because Mr. Miller made him cry." Nina and Malcolm exchanged glances. This was the first they'd heard about other children, but it made horrible sense. Predators rarely limited themselves to a single victim. Officer Brooks made a note in her pad. "We'll definitely follow up on that information, Lisa. Thank you for being so brave and telling us all of this." But Officer Thompson was already moving toward the door. "We'll be in touch within the next few days. In the meantime, keep documenting any incidents and consider alternative transportation arrangements for Lisa." After the officers left, the Johnson family sat in their living room, feeling a mix of relief and frustration. They had taken the first step, but it was clear that the road ahead would be long and difficult. "What happens now, Mama?" Lisa asked, leaning against Nina's shoulder. Nina kissed the top of her daughter's head, breathing in her familiar scent and trying to summon a confidence she didn't entirely feel. "Now we fight, baby girl. We fight until justice is done." The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, matching the heavy feeling that had settled over the Johnson household. Nina had barely slept, spending most of the night researching their legal options and documenting everything Lisa had told them. Malcolm had called in sick to work, determined to see this through regardless of the consequences. At 7:30 a.m., they made the difficult decision to keep Lisa home from school. The thought of putting her back on that bus, under the control of the man who had hurt her, was unbearable. Instead, Nina drove Lisa to school herself, walking her daughter all the way to the classroom door and speaking quietly with Mrs. Peterson, Lisa's teacher. "Has Lisa seemed different lately?" Nina asked, more withdrawn or anxious than usual. Mrs. Peterson, a kind woman in her 50s with gentle eyes, considered the question carefully. "Now that you mention it, she has seemed a bit quieter in recent weeks, less eager to participate in discussions. I attributed it to being new, still adjusting to our classroom dynamic." Nina felt another pang of guilt. How many signs had they missed? How long had Lisa been suffering in silence, trying to protect her parents from worry? Meanwhile, across town, Officers Thompson and Brooks were pulling into the parking lot of the school district's transportation department. The building was a utilitarian concrete structure that housed the bus fleet and administrative offices, a place where few parents ever had reason to visit. Robert Miller was in the break room when they arrived, sharing coffee and jokes with several other drivers. At 54, he cut an imposing figure, over 6 feet tall with broad shoulders and hands that looked capable of handling more than just a steering wheel. His colleagues clearly respected him. He was often the one they turned to when dealing with difficult children or demanding parents. "Bob Miller, we're Officers Thompson and Brooks. We need to speak with you about an incident involving one of your passengers." Miller's expression shifted slightly, but he maintained his composure. "Of course, officers. Whatever I can do to help. Is this about that little Johnson girl? I figured her parents might cause trouble sooner or later." Officer Brooks raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean by that, Mr. Miller?" "Oh, you know how some families are," Miller said with a casual shrug. "They move into a nice neighborhood like ours and immediately start looking for problems that don't exist. That little girl is a handful, disrespectful, noisy, doesn't follow rules. I've been driving buses for 15 years, and I've learned that sometimes you have to be firm with kids who don't understand boundaries." The Johnson family alleges that you physically grabbed their daughter, left her stranded several blocks from home, and made racially charged comments, Officer Thompson said, his tone neutral but watchful. Miller's laugh was hearty and seemingly genuine. "Officers, that's ridiculous. I would never lay a hand on a child, and I certainly wouldn't say anything inappropriate about race. Look around. I drive routes through diverse neighborhoods. I've got kids of all backgrounds on my buses, and I treat them all the same." He gestured toward his supervisor, who had approached when he noticed the police presence. "Ask Jim here. Ask any of my colleagues. I've never had a complaint filed against me. I volunteer at my church. I coach Little League Baseball. The suggestion that I would harm a child is frankly offensive. Officer Brooks wasn't convinced. There was something in Miller's easy confidence, the way he'd immediately assumed they were there about Lisa before they'd even mentioned her name, that raised red flags. Mr. Miller, would you mind if we took a look at your bus? Specifically, we'd like to check if there are any security cameras that might have recorded interactions with passengers. For the first time, Miller's composure slipped slightly. Cameras? No, the older buses don't have camera systems. Budget cuts, you know. The district keeps saying they'll upgrade, but Jim, the supervisor, interrupted. Actually, Bob, your bus was one of the first to get cameras installed. That happened last month, remember? Part of the new safety initiative. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Miller's face had gone slightly pale, and Officer Brooks noticed a thin sheen of perspiration forming on his forehead, despite the cool morning air. Yes, I suppose there might be cameras, but they probably don't work half the time. These systems are notoriously unreliable. We'll need to review any available footage from the past several weeks, Officer Thompson said firmly. And we'll need contact information for other families whose children ride your route. As the officers prepared to leave with a promise to return with a warrant for the footage, Miller called out after them. Officers, I hope you'll consider the source of these allegations. That family is new here, probably looking for a way to get attention or maybe even a lawsuit. You know how it is. But Officer Brooks had turned back, her expression hard. No, Mr. Miller, I don't know how it is. Why don't you explain to me exactly what you mean by that? Miller's eyes darted between the two officers, realizing he had said too much. I just mean, well, sometimes people see prejudice where none exists. It's unfortunate, but it happens. As they walked back to their patrol car, Officer Brooks shook her head. Did you hear that? He knew exactly which family we were talking about before we mentioned names. And that comment about the source of these allegations, that's not how innocent people talk. Officer Thompson was quiet for a moment. Let's see what those tapes show us. And Brooks? Start compiling a list of other families whose kids ride Miller's route. Something tells me we're going to need to cast a wider net. But as they drove away, neither officer noticed the curtains twitching in the windows of the houses they passed, or the small groups of neighbors gathering on sidewalks, whispering about the police cars that had been seen around the Johnson house the night before. In small communities, word travels fast, and opinions form even faster. The battle for Lisa Johnson's truth was just beginning. By the time Nina returned home from dropping Lisa at school, her phone was already ringing. The caller ID showed the name of another mother from Lisa's class, Jennifer Martinez, whose son rode the same bus route. Nina? Hi, it's Jennifer. I heard through the parent grapevine that there might have been some trouble with Mr. Miller. Is everything okay? Nina hesitated. She and Malcolm had discussed this. How much to share, how to balance their need for allies with their desire to protect Lisa's privacy. But the genuine concern in Jennifer's voice decided her. Actually, Jennifer, I'm glad you called. Lisa has been having some serious problems with the bus driver. Has Carlos mentioned anything unusual? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Jennifer spoke again, her voice was tight with suppressed emotion. Oh my God, Nina. Carlos has been begging me for weeks to drive him to school instead of taking the bus. You wouldn't tell me why, just kept saying the bus driver was mean. I thought it was typical kid stuff, you know? Not wanting to get up early, preferring to ride with Mom. What exactly did Carlos say about Mr. Miller? He said Mr. Miller always made him sit in the very back row, even though Carlos gets carsick back there. And a few times, Carlos came home saying Mr. Miller had yelled at him for asking questions. You know how curious 8-year-olds can be. But Nina, Carlos is usually such a happy kid. Lately, he's been having nightmares, waking up worried about school. Nina felt her heart sink. Another child, another family that had noticed signs but hadn't known how to interpret them. Jennifer, the police are investigating. They spoke with Miller yesterday, and they're looking into getting surveillance footage from the bus. Would you be willing to have Carlos talk to them, if necessary? Absolutely. Nina, I'm so sorry this happened to Lisa. And I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I kept telling myself I was probably overreacting. As Nina hung up the phone, it immediately rang again. This time, it was Patricia Williams, the mother of 10-year-old Marcus, the boy Lisa had mentioned to the police. "Mrs. Johnson? I hope you don't mind me calling. My sister-in-law works at the district office, and she heard there might be an investigation into Bob Miller. I need to tell you, Marcus used to ride that bus, but I've been driving him to school since the beginning of October." "What happened with Marcus?" Nina asked, though she was beginning to dread the answer. "Marcus is a sensitive kid, maybe a little different from other children his age. He has ADHD and sometimes has trouble sitting still or being quiet. According to Marcus, Mr. Miller would single him out constantly, making him stand up during the bus ride as punishment, calling him defective in front of other kids, and one day—" Patricia's voice broke slightly. "One day he made Marcus get off the bus and walk the last mile home because Marcus had been humming quietly to himself." Nina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of these revelations settling on her shoulders. "Patricia, did you report this to anyone?" "I called the transportation office and spoke to the supervisor. He said he'd look into it, but nothing seemed to happen. When Marcus begged me not to make him ride the bus anymore, I figured it was easier just to drive him myself. But I should have pushed harder. I should have protected other kids, too." The calls continued throughout the morning. Sarah's mother, who had switched her daughter to a different bus route after Sarah came home, crying multiple times. The parent of a kindergartner who had started wetting himself again after being potty trained for 2 years. A father whose son had developed a stutter that coincided with the beginning of the school year. Each story was slightly different, but the pattern was unmistakable. Miller had been targeting children who were different. Children of color, children with learning disabilities, children who were shy or sensitive or new to the district. Children who were less likely to speak up, less likely to be believed, less likely to have parents with the resources or confidence to fight back. By noon, Nina had documented 7 families whose children had experienced problems with Miller. She was preparing to call Officer Brooks when Malcolm burst through the front door, his expression grim. "The footage," he said without preamble. "I just got off the phone with Officer Brooks. The transportation department claims the camera system on Miller's bus has been malfunctioning for the past 3 weeks. No usable footage of any incidents." Nina felt her stomach drop. "How convenient." "That's what I said. But Brooks thinks there might be backup footage stored on a central server. She's working on getting a warrant to access the district's digital archives." The phone rang again, and this time Nina saw a number she didn't recognize with a local area code. "Hello, Mrs. Johnson? This is Rebecca Chun. I'm a reporter with the Millbrook Heights Gazette. I understand there's been an allegation of misconduct against a school bus driver. I was wondering if you'd be willing to comment." Nina's first instinct was to hang up, but she caught Malcolm's eye and saw him nod slightly. They had discussed this possibility too, the double-edged sword of media attention. "Ms. Chun, I appreciate your interest in this story, but right now our focus is on supporting our daughter and cooperating with the police investigation." "I understand completely, Mrs. Johnson, but I should let you know, I've been doing some research on Robert Miller. This isn't the first time his name has come up in concerning situations involving children of color. Are you aware that he was transferred from his previous district following an incident that was quietly settled out of court?" Nina felt her blood run cold. "What kind of incident?" "I'm still gathering details, but it involved allegations of discriminatory treatment and inappropriate physical contact with students. The family accepted a financial settlement in exchange for keeping the details confidential." "Mrs. Johnson, if you and your husband are willing to speak on the record, I think there's a much larger story here that needs to be told." As Nina listened to the reporter's words, she realized that their fight was about to become much bigger and much more public than they had ever imagined. But looking across the room at her husband, seeing the determination in his eyes that matched her own, she knew they were ready for whatever came next. "Ms. Chun," Nina said slowly, "let me discuss this with my husband and call you back. But yes, I think it's time the truth came to light." The story broke on the front page of Thursday morning's Millbrook Heights Gazette with a headline that sent shockwaves through the community. "Multiple families allege pattern of abuse by school bus driver." Rebecca Chun had done her homework, uncovering not just Miller's previous settlement, but also a paper trail of complaints that had been filed and mysteriously dismissed over his 15-year career. The article featured interviews with 5 families, including the Johnsons, each sharing their child's experience with Miller. The piece was carefully written, presenting facts without sensationalism, but the cumulative effect was devastating. The community that had prided itself on its excellent schools and safe environment was forced to confront the possibility that they had allowed a predator to operate under their protection for years. By 8 a.m., Nina's phone was ringing nonstop. Some calls were supportive, parents thanking her for speaking out, community members expressing outrage and solidarity. But others were hostile, accusatory, suggesting that the Johnsons were troublemakers seeking attention or money. "You people just moved here, and you're already trying to tear down our community," one anonymous caller hissed before hanging up. "Bob Miller is a good man who's given his life to helping children. This is nothing but a race-baiting witch hunt." Malcolm had to leave for work. Their savings wouldn't stretch to cover many more missed days. But he was reluctant to leave Nina and Lisa alone with the phone ringing constantly and reporters gathering outside their home. "I'll be fine," Nina assured him, though they both knew the situation was spiraling beyond their control. "Lisa's staying home again today, and Officer Brooks said she'd drive by periodically to make sure we're okay." At the school district's emergency board meeting that afternoon, the auditorium was packed with parents, teachers, and community members whose opinions ran the full spectrum from outrage to skepticism. Superintendent Dr. Margaret Foster, a thin woman with steel-gray hair and rimless glasses, called for order repeatedly as voices rose in heated debate. "The district is taking these allegations very seriously," Dr. Foster announced from the podium. "Mr. Miller has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We have implemented additional safety protocols and are reviewing our screening and oversight procedures for all transportation staff." But her carefully measured words did little to calm the crowd. Parents of Miller's former passengers stood up to share their own stories, while his supporters countered with testimonials about his character and years of dedicated service. "This is a travesty," shouted Tom Henderson, whose daughter had graduated 2 years earlier. "Bob Miller coached my daughter's softball team. He's helped dozens of kids over the years. One family makes accusations, and suddenly he's treated like a criminal." From the back of the auditorium, Nina Johnson rose slowly to her feet. The conversations around her died down as people turned to look at the woman whose daughter's allegations had started this firestorm. "I understand that this is difficult for everyone," Nina began, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "No one wants to believe that someone they trusted could harm children. But this isn't about one family making accusations. This is about a pattern of behavior that multiple families have now documented. This is about children who have been hurt and silenced." She paused, looking around the room at the faces staring back at her, some supportive, others hostile, many simply confused and searching for answers. "My daughter is 6 years old. She should have to know what it feels like to be abandoned on the side of the road by an adult she was supposed to trust. She shouldn't have bruises on her arms for being grabbed and dragged. And she certainly shouldn't have been told that her skin color makes her a liar who won't be believed." Nina's voice grew stronger as she continued. "But you know what? She was believed, not just by her parents, but by other parents whose children experienced similar treatment, by police officers who are doing their job and investigating these allegations thoroughly, and by community members who understand that protecting children is more important than protecting the reputation of any individual adult. This isn't just about one man," she said, her words carrying across the silent auditorium. "This is about a system that allowed him to transfer from district to district after complaints were raised. This is about a culture that prioritizes the comfort of adults over the safety of children. This is about ensuring that what happened to my daughter and to other children never happens again." When Nina sat down, the applause was scattered but genuine. She had spoken not just as a mother protecting her child, but as a community member challenging everyone present to do better. Dr. Foster returned to the podium, her expression more subdued than before. "Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. The district will be forming a special committee to review our policies and procedures. We welcome input from parents and community members as we work to ensure the safety and well-being of all our students." But even as the meeting concluded and people began to file out, Nina could feel the weight of the stairs following her, hear the whispered conversations that stopped when she passed. The battle lines had been drawn, and she knew the fight was far from over. As she walked to her car, a woman approached her, Patricia Williams, Marcus's mother, flanked by two other parents Nina recognized from the newspaper article. "Nina," Patricia said quietly, "we want you to know you're not alone in this. We're going to see it through together, whatever happens next." For the first time in days, Nina felt a spark of hope. The truth was out now, and while not everyone was ready to accept it, there were enough people willing to stand up for what was right to make a difference. 3 weeks later, the breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A former bus driver named Margaret Thompson, who had worked in Miller's previous district, came forward with a flash drive containing security footage she had saved from her own bus, footage that showed Miller's interactions with children during joint field trips and transportation events. The videos were damning. They showed Miller grabbing children roughly, speaking to them in ways that were clearly inappropriate, and demonstrating a pattern of targeting minority students and children with disabilities. Most significantly, they corroborated the accounts given by the Johnson family and others, providing the concrete evidence that Officer Brooks had been seeking. "This changes everything," Officer Brooks told Nina over the phone. "We have Miller in custody, and the district attorney is confident we can proceed with formal charges, not just for the assault on Lisa, but for a pattern of child endangerment and civil rights violations." The arrest made national news. The story of a small suburban community grappling with institutional racism and child abuse resonated across the country, sparking conversations about school safety, oversight of transportation staff, and the importance of believing children when they speak up about mistreatment. For Lisa, however, the path to healing was more gradual and personal. The nightmares that had started after the incident on the bus took weeks to fade. She struggled with anxiety about riding in any vehicle with adults she didn't know well. But with the help of a skilled child therapist and the unwavering support of her parents, she began to reclaim her sense of safety and trust. "I want to go back to riding the bus," Lisa announced one morning in early December, surprising both her parents. But not with someone scary like Mr. Miller. The new bus driver was Mrs. Angela Rodriguez, a warm woman in her 40s with 3 children of her own. She had been carefully vetted by a district selection committee that now included parent representatives. On Lisa's first day back on the bus, Mrs. Rodriguez greeted her with a genuine smile and a simple but powerful message. "Good morning, Lisa. I'm so glad you're here. You're safe with me." The changes in the district went far beyond personnel. New cameras were installed on every bus, with footage automatically uploaded to secure servers each day. Anonymous reporting systems were established so children and parents could voice concerns without fear of retaliation. Most significantly, the district implemented comprehensive bias training for all staff and created a community oversight board with real power to investigate complaints and enforce accountability. Malcolm had been promoted at work, partly, he suspected, because his company wanted to demonstrate their support for his family during their very public ordeal. Nina had been invited to speak at conferences about child advocacy and community organizing, sharing the Johnson family story as an example of how ordinary parents could create extraordinary change. But perhaps the most meaningful transformation was in the relationships within their community. The neighbors who had once seemed cold and unwelcoming began to reach out, some apologizing for their initial skepticism, others simply offering friendship and support. The children at Lisa's school, with the guidance of teachers trained in diversity and inclusion, had rallied around her, making her feel more accepted and valued than she had ever felt before. One evening in late spring, as Nina was tucking Lisa into bed, Her daughter asked a question that showed how much she had grown and healed over the past months. "Mama, do you think Mr. Miller learned his lesson? Do you think he'll be nicer to kids now?" Nina considered her answer carefully. "I think Mr. Miller has consequences for his actions now, baby girl. Whether he learns from them or not is up to him. But you know what? Because you were brave enough to tell the truth, other children are safer now. That matters more than whether Mr. Miller changes." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad I told you what happened, even though it was scary. So am I, sweetheart. So am I." The following September, as Lisa prepared to start second grade, she stood at her bedroom window watching children gather at the bus stop on the corner. Mrs. Rodriguez's bright yellow bus pulled up right on schedule, and Lisa could see the driver's warm greeting for each child who climbed aboard. "Are you ready for another adventure?" Nina asked, helping Lisa adjust her new backpack. Lisa smiled, a confident, joyful expression that Nina hadn't seen enough of in recent months. "I'm ready, Mama. I'm not scared anymore." As they walked hand in hand toward the bus stop, Nina reflected on everything their family had endured and overcome. They hadn't just protected their daughter. They had ignited a movement that transformed their entire community. They had proven that silence protects no one, but courage, even in the face of doubt and opposition, protects everyone. The bus doors opened with a gentle whoosh, and Mrs. Rodriguez's voice rang out cheerfully. "Good morning, Lisa. Ready for a great day at school?" Lisa climbed the steps confidently, turned to wave goodbye to her mother, and found her seat among friends who were genuinely happy to see her. As the bus pulled away, Nina felt a deep sense of peace settle in her heart. Their fight had been difficult, sometimes frightening, often exhausting. But it had been worth every moment to see her daughter reclaim her joy, her confidence, and her faith in the world around her. Justice hadn't just been served in a courtroom. It had been planted in the hearts of a community that had learned to do better, to listen more carefully, and to protect all children with the fierce dedication they deserved. The Johnsons had started as a family seeking safety for their daughter. They had become leaders in a movement that would protect generations of children yet to come. And in the process, they had discovered that home isn't just a place where you feel safe. It's a place where you make safety possible for others. As Lisa's laughter drifted through the bus windows and faded into the morning air, Nina smiled and turned toward home, knowing that this was indeed where they belonged.